Presented exclusively by Mother's Polish.
Welcome back to another edition of the Slipstream Podcast. This is your host, Brady. And joining us in the Slipstream for this episode, we have our boys Austin, Matthew, Coltrickle Jr., and a very special guest hopping in our DRS train tonight, Ross Fruin, the CEO of GridRival, a fantasy and gambling experience tailored directly to motorsports fans. So Ross, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat with you all tonight.
Yeah, so for those that follow us on social media, first, thank you. But you may have seen our posts recently about our season-long Slipstream Podcast fantasy league that we play against each other, which currently, unfortunately, Coltrickle Jr. is leading. But I'm coming. I'm only 300 points down. And this league is actually hosted by our friends at GridRival. So that's how we found GridRival. We've been big into fantasy for 4 or 5 years. We've obviously been into fantasy sports for probably a lot longer than that. And we've really enjoyed using GridRival. So, Ross, first, just tell us a little bit about you. I have one trivia question to start, though. Are you a sock, shoe kind of guy, or are you a sock, shoe guy?
Sock? I don't even know what that means. Sock, shoes?
Yeah, do you put both socks on before the shoes, or do you do one sock, then one shoe, and one sock, then the other shoe?
Oh, definitely 2 socks and then 2 shoes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You're not a psycho, so that's good.
Certified serial killer if it's the other way.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I think it's all the rage now. So Matt and I are Clemson grads, and we saw our Clemson football players ask the same question, and the reactions were unbelievable. Anyone that's sock, shoe, we've got problems. So
yeah, wow.
Good to know you're on the right side of that fence.
Yeah, for sure.
Just first to get to know you, so tell us a little bit about your background. You're obviously a big motorsports fan. How'd you first fall in love with either F1 or motorsports?
Big motorsports fan. I fell in love. I think like all of us in some way are somewhat interested in, cars. So I kind of grew up as a car fanatic. I didn't actually get into racing really until probably early teens. And I actually vividly remember the moment. I had spent the night at a friend's house, and his father was from South Africa. And, back then it was like, Formula One, as you guys all are very aware of, had a very difficult time growing in the United States over the past 30 years. And so back then, you didn't get a ton of opportunity to see it. I think in 2000, when the story I'm telling you took place, I think that's back when you had to have a subscription to Speed Vision to even watch an F1 race, and certainly something that my family didn't have. And so I remember spending the night at this guy's house, and I woke up to the sound of F1. And, he had my friend knew about it, and it was obvious that he watched it a bunch with his dad. But I so vividly remember sitting on the couch, listening to his dad in his South African accent, kind of commentate on this race and what was happening. And I was like, how have I not known about this? And I just fell in love with it. It was, of course, in the Michael Schumacher era. So kind of grew a quick obsession with him, and actually ended up getting into karting a little bit in my late teens, and kind of just became a patron for a really long time. And, I had a brief stint where I thought it was a possibility to make a living out of it, but that was before I realized that you had to be either really good or really wealthy, or some combination of the both. And if I look back and I'm candid with myself, I was definitely neither of those things. So it was a good thing not to pursue, but I've continued to love it over the years. And as far as on the business side, I've been kind of an entrepreneur my whole life. I started my first business when I was 28, which was a media buying and advertising agency that I built and ran for 6 or 7 years. And GridRival actually started as a side project when I was running that company. And it started because it'd be interesting to hear where you guys stand on the spectrum. But most people that I talk to that are motorsports fans are usually exclusively or mostly race fans. I don't talk to a ton of people who are I love football as much as I love Formula One. And so that's how I was growing up. I just really gravitated towards motorsports. There's other things I enjoy. It's not like I hate the NFL or like, we'll never watch an NBA game, but it's just not the things that I really love. And so I kind of always saw my friends playing fantasy football and March Madness, and I kind of watched the engagement that it created. And kind of the genesis story of Grid Rivals is a little bit funny because I went to we go to the F1 race every year in Austin. We take a big RV and park it along the back straight there. And on the Thursday in 2016, on the Thursday evening before the race, I was inside our RV and I could hear one of the friends that I was with outside yelling. And so I went out to go find out, what the deal was. And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He had his phone up. He was looking at his phone, and there was a football game on the TV that he was watching, and he was yelling because his fantasy team was losing. And I so vividly remember that moment being the kind of moment where I was like, why does nothing like this exist for some of the sports that I love? And so initially the desire to solve that problem was purely to scratch my own itch. I had very little ambition for it as a business. I was running another company at the same time. It was doing fine, which is, oftentimes hard to do. So there's no reason to kind of move along. And it was more for fun. And so we built the first version of GridRival, launched it in 2017 as a web-only product, barely even worked on a phone, definitely wasn't a mobile native app. And we signed up 22,000 users in the first week. And so
that's great.
That obviously made me pay a lot more attention to things. And, now we're here, and I'm sure that I'm happy to. I'm answering more than your questions, so I'm happy to fill in that gap if we want to.
Yeah, just to respond to your question about where we are on the spectrum, I think Austin has an RSS feed that's only Max Verstappen, so he definitely fits your diehard motorsports F1 fan.
Yeah.
And then the fantasy football analogy, I just lost this week by 0.12 points, so I understand that frustration and that passion. But yeah. I would imagine being in your role with Grid Rivals has allowed you, or maybe even before that, some opportunities to experience some really cool motorsports experience. I see behind you, you've got two track outlines or track maps. I'm curious what those are and what your sort of best motorsports experience has been so far.
Oh, boo. You don't know those? That's Nürburgring and that's Silverstone.
I was going to ask if you knew, Austin. I figured you know.
I would say it looks like Le Mans.
Those are both incorrect.
What?
Yeah, there you go. So
yeah.
That's Circuit des Stars, and if I said that right, and then this is actually Laguna Seca.
Austin's going to be up all night studying track.
He's so mad right now.
There. I'm so devastated.
I love the confidence that you said it with too.
That's all. That's all I'm made of is confidence.
Yeah. Best motorsports experience. So I mean, it's a really good question because I save the credentials that I get and put them on I have them in the closet behind me because one of the reasons, one of the things that happened in my last business is I was like 5 years into it, and I kind of realized like I forgot why I started it in the first place. I had lost track of like what was important to me, and I wanted to make sure that didn't happen with GridRival because it's really easy when you get into managing investors and building something that's high growth and all the stress that comes with it. And so one of the things that really was exciting to me about doing this project was I knew that if we could grow this to the scale that I think it's capable of being grown to, that the amount of doors that would be opened to me and the company and, the experiences that we could partake in as it relates to being engaged in the sport would be like nothing that I'd ever experienced. And so I've definitely had a lot of glimpses of that. We had some very early success with investors. The first ever investor in GridRival was a guy named Rob Ferriol, who's been without him, like he's one of those people that there's a handful of people that we just would not be here without. And he was one of them. And he's a gentleman driver, races in the WeatherTech series. And so got to have a lot of early experiences with access at IMSA events and IndyCar events. And, but I think the probably pinnacle so far would be just this last June, we're at the 24-hour Le Mans guests of the United Autosport team. Have a friend who is an LMP2 driver. And so we just we had full all access. We were able to go into the garages and watch pit stops and hang out in like the team hospitality. And, I think one of the highlights of my entire professional career was like after that race, we were at this huge chateau, like just me and my wife and like 5 of the drivers and their spouses just like hanging out kind of until the darkness came, and we had to drive home. And I just remember on that drive home just kind of thinking to myself, like, I can't believe that just happened. So that was definitely a highlight, and I hope that there's many more of those to come.
Yeah, I would imagine that that's pretty awesome. I know Austin got to go to the Miami Formula One race.
Oh, cool.
Cole, I don't know if you've seen a Formula One car in person, so I haven't either yet. Hopefully sooner than later, maybe next year, Vegas. But I've been to a lot of NASCAR races, and I'm sure I'd get booed off the stage a little bit here comparing NASCAR and Formula One. So I'm not comparing the two. It's just a different appreciation when you actually see it live in the speed that it has. And I can only imagine that a Formula One car or those cars that you got to see are just on a whole different level. Just Austin, I don't know if you want to tell a little bit about that story where you were at the end of Miami, but just the ability to slow down and speed up like that is just something else, right?
Yeah, I mean, going from 220 to 200 plus miles an hour to 60 in 80 meters is just unbelievable. And like just the sound of it, you hear the wind moving. That's why I'm behind in fantasy, by the way, as I was on site at Miami during qualifying. It did not set my lineup. Sorry about it.
Man, it happens to the best of us. Happened to me. We actually just rolled out a beta of our new product last weekend, and I was just too busy like switching between production and beta, and like I blew it. So it happens to even the founder of the business.
At least you're not. Let me just get a quick update here. At least you're not down by 10,000 points like that is.
Oh, come on.
That's a fairly insurmountable gap.
I'm gonna make a charge these last 6-7 races.
If you quit your league and rejoin, you'll be given as many points as the person in last place. So that might be a better way to restart.
It's a double-edged sword for him.
He is the last place guy. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Just real quick on Formula One in this season, want to get just your quick take. What do you think about the 2022 season so far? Do you think the new regulations are working? Is Max going to break 100% records? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're working, and I think the surprise was like, if you look into the lead up of it, I think a lot of people were concerned that it's too homologous, the right word, or like the cars are going to be too similar, right? And the nuance that has always been such an important part of the constructor element in Formula One would be too muted. And I think we've all seen that like that totally, was the opposite. And I think there's like, the front wings and the rear wings all look very similar, but like the side pod stuff was like totally, unexpected. And I think the difference, the fact that you're seeing, a team like Mercedes kind of arguably struggle, right? I say that relative to how they've done in the past, not relative to other teams. But so I think that part has been a really interesting and kind of unexpected, and welcomed thing that's taken place. But I think the racing, it's obvious that their tremendous investment they made into the aero package and the Venturi tunnel and all this stuff to reduce dirty air behind the cars has made a significant impact on racing. It's some of the best and most consistently the best racing I've seen as an F1 fan in maybe a decade or more. I think in the years prior, like you'd always have these, couple 3-4 events every year where it was like this really awesome battle, but it's like you're starting to see them almost on a race by race basis, which is exactly what the sport needed. So I've been a huge fan of it. I'm super thrilled with just the mix up, right? I think like anytime you have a team that's as dominant as Mercedes was for as long as they were dominant, it's not good for the sport. And so, I would be lying if I didn't say that like I wished it was a team that wasn't Red Bull that was leading that charge, because then like they were the ones that did it before Mercedes. I'd love to see like McLaren have their kind of reign, or another team. And so my hope is that some of these teams over the coming years will figure this out and get closer and closer to each other.
Your top three if you were to choose in your perfect world, top 3 constructors that finished at the end of the season would be who? Forget the speed, right? Just based on you being a fan, who would you choose 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think number one would be McLaren. Yeah, I think number two. Oh, let's see. Number two, I'd love to see
Yeah.
I'm throwing out crazy stuff. You didn't put parameters around this, so I would say I'd love to see Williams make a comeback, and my wild card would probably be like Haas because they're American, and I think Gunther Steiner's a psycho.
Yeah, he's a sock shoe kind of guy for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
He probably puts his shoes on without socks.
I'll be curious what happens. We can talk more about the seats later. I can't wait to see what Haas does with that second seat. We're obviously, being in America, we're so excited to see what they do. We're just like refreshing nonstop what's going to happen with it.
I agree. And I say that just so you know about Gunther in like the most loving way. Like he is a very interesting human being.
I think Netflix brought him all into our hearts.
100%. Yeah, so I have a soft spot for McLaren. I really, really want to see them succeed. We've seen glimpses of it, and I just think, with how iconic the brand is, the vehicles they make, the efforts that has been put into that run, I feel like it's unfortunate they're not, a bit higher than
Was dumping Danny Ricciardo the right move, or no?
Probably. I mean, for the sport in general, like if Daniel Ricciardo doesn't find a spot and come back to the sport, I think that's a macro negative for the sport. I think he's a really good personality, and I think like the reason Formula One is working right now and why Drive to Survive is working right now doesn't have to do with aero changes and power unit changes. I think it has to do with the storytelling and the personalities, and so I think it'll be a loss for the sport to lose him. But I mean, if I'm looking at it purely from like Zach Brown's position of like we need to perform, I think one of the challenges with a lot of these drivers that have been here for 10 years is you're not getting the people like Nick, who we saw this weekend, just crush it. Like, how many of him are there out there that are just like not getting the opportunity to step up as much as maybe they could be if like there was a more regular rotation of people in and out? And so like Daniel Ricciardo is like literally one of my favorite drivers on the grid, so it pains me to say that. But I think like if you're looking at it strategically, like, is there other human beings on planet Earth that could put that car at a faster pace than he could, that are readily available and willing to come do it? Like, I'd have a hard time saying that there probably wouldn't be. I
you bring up a good point with Nick. Like he beat Latifi in F2. Like it was already proven that he was better, but he was tied up to that reserve role, so he didn't get the main seat.
Yeah, but do you gamble on a 27-year-old as well? Like I understand he deserves a seat, but again, he's not young. Yeah, you're not going to build a team around like. He's only got 5 years in him, whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. And it was one performance, I mean, it's, but yeah, I agree. I think you could slice it both ways. I think, give him a couple of other opportunities and see what happens. But, I mean, to the degree that that's true, what I said is true for Daniel Ricciardo. Like, I think we all know it's true for Latifi too. Like, why is he still there?
Safina Foods money.
Foods.
Yeah. I mean, that's the answer. That's always the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think we all know that, but it's money, right? Yeah. It's an expensive sport. If you can bring money, not to say he's probably not a bad driver. I mean, you don't get to F1 if you're not in the top, 100th of a percentile of talent in existence in the world. But amongst that group, it's the top 20 that matter.
Yeah, so it does. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, it does seem like over the last, decade or so, what you were saying, there's not this rotation of guys. I just looked up Lewis Hamilton in his career has only faced 85 different drivers on the grid, where like Michael Schumacher faced 144. So you've got that's an
interesting stat. Yeah,
that's a lot of difference in that rotation of guys coming in and coming out. That, like you said, maybe there are these other guys, young faces that should have an opportunity instead of letting guys sit there for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I don't remember that as much as a child either. I mean, I feel like I remember a lot more regular rotation, it's hard to remember back that long, but I don't really remember when I was a young fan, like seeing guys stay in F1 into their 40s. We've seen that like a decent chunk with Raikkonen, with Alonso. I think like that seems to be more common than it used to be, and I'm not sure why that is. But I think there's got to be plenty of up and comers who can fill those seats and perform. But as we all know, like Formula One is not always a game of common sense. There's politics involved, and there's cost, and all the things have to come together to make it work.
And Seb's in his 50s, which is crazy.
There's a lot of Seb hate on this podcast, Ross. I got the Seb headband tonight in honor.
No.
There's not a lot. There's just one.
It's me. I mean, So to your point, I'm much quicker to rip the Band-Aid off. Like with Danny Rick, love Danny Rick. I'd love to hang out with the guy, but it is Wednesday, so this is when I say washed Wednesday. Just when you don't have it, you don't have it, and it's just it's okay to admit that. You can still be a fan and appreciate what Seb's done, what Danny Ricks has done, but it's time for someone else to give it a shot. We've talked about this on our podcast. I mean, I think Lando has more than 80% of McLaren's points this year, which just isn't a good driver pairing. That's not what Zach Brown wants, right? He probably wants it closer to 50-50. Assuming they're both scoring a lot of points, I would imagine. So yeah, that's my little Wash Wednesdays plug. But do have a couple of speed questions for you real quick, and then a couple questions specific to GridRival. So just yes or no for the first couple.
Okay.
Is Lewis Hamilton the GOAT?
Oof. I'm going to say no.
Okay. Will he get an 8th title?
I don't think so.
Okay. Will Max break all of his records?
No.
Okay.
I hope not.
This one isn't yes or no. A little more one-word answer, I guess, or first and last name. Who's your favorite F1 driver of all time?
Oh, for sure, Michael Schumacher.
Love it.
Yep.
So I'm assuming he's the GOAT over Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, he's the GOAT over Lewis. I didn't understand the sport as much back then, so I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't tell you to what degree like Michael Schumacher's reign had to do purely with the vehicle he was driving versus purely him being the best on the grid. I mean, if we're purely talking about like numbers, right? Like I think Fangio has the most wins as a percentage of races he's ever entered. So it just kind of depends on what you look at. I think like GOAT for me, I'm answering with a bit of like a small percentage of emotion too, right? Like Michael Schumacher's my GOAT. If I wasn't like, he's literally the reason I was obsessed with the sport when I was little. So it'd be hard for me to choose Lewis over him, but Lewis is undeniably, one of the most incredible race car drivers that's ever lived on our planet. And I think I'm super, super interested to see what he does after F1. I'm really excited to see, how he does when he goes and races in the 24-hour of Le Mans, or, the 24 hours of Daytona, or, NASCAR or IndyCar, any of the things that he ends up doing, assuming he does anything. He may not. He certainly doesn't have the financial need to do anything else, but yeah.
That's right. He's right out here. Yeah, I go looking for his mansion pretty regularly at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to his menswear line. So.
Yeah.
I appreciate your, response about the GOAT. I mean, I see your golf clubs in the back, so I'm a big golfer. That could be a whole nother podcast. I fully believe Tiger's the GOAT. It's not close. I know that Jack's got the majors record, but for me, I grew up, I basically played golf because of Tiger Woods, right? And it's a lot of people got into Formula One, in our generation because of Michael Schumacher, and it's hard to knock him off that pedestal no matter how good someone is after it.
For sure. I agree.
So I want to know a little bit more about GridRival. I know today the game that we play focuses on that free-to-play season-long F1 fantasy, but I know sort of near term, I don't know when, or if you could tell us, but I know you want to move into more of that weekly or daily fantasy sports world that's hot right now, and even maybe some sports gambling. Is that true?
Yep, absolutely. So we kind of that was always the goal from the get-go. So we kind of prove the audience, so to speak, with a free play game that you all are using right now, a new version of that, or actually really a new, much better, more performant application of that comes out hopefully the next week or two. And then where I was saying is kind of the whole point of that free play model was to prove that there was an audience that was significant enough in size to warrant, venture style investment and the potential to, build a sports book type product that's unique and authentic to motorsports that would be big enough to, to be a lucrative enterprise. And so we did that with a free play product. And then we went out and raised our first venture capital around last September. And the entire goal of that was to get our first real money gaming product live. And so that's literally with, this weekend, we're going to be doing our first internal company like test on that product, end-to-end test. If that goes well, we're probably looking at, another 2 to 4 weeks of stuff internally to get that ready to roll out to production. That product will be, the simplest way I could describe it is like a daily version of the game that you guys are already playing. So very similar game mechanics, right? Salary cap, you pick a team of drivers, constructors. You're going to be placed in pools of anywhere from 2 to like 100 people. With entry fees to start with, for the first 6 months of anywhere between $3 and $50. So we're not talking like $1 million prize pools and stuff out the gate, but it's really just to kind of test the model. And that'll be live in 25 states here in the US, followed by most of Canada except Ontario. And then we got our UK gambling license about 3 months ago. So we're hoping to be live in the UK like best case late fall, most likely springtime next year, with the addition of, so right now there's F1 and MotoGP. The next series you're going to see on there are IndyCar and NASCAR. And then kind of the goal is to really grow that product over the next 6 months and see what user acquisition looks like, see what engagement looks like, see if the numbers are checking the boxes that we need them to kind of more investment. And then we'll go raise another fundraising round probably in the springtime. And then kind of from there, like the next thing is moving more towards like a traditional, less kind of pool-based model, less the 5 of us, each put in $20 and the winner gets this, to adding on more of like a singular products where it's like you just have to pick, the best 3 people out of this pool, or whether this guy's likely to finish over under this position, or more of kind of like a pick 'em game is what it's referred to in this industry, which moves us more towards like a traditional sportsbook product, which is kind of the end goal for us, but a few years down the road. But so that's kind of the vision, is really, we believe, if you look at FanDuel and DraftKings and BetMGM and all these major operators, if you try and go to find racing on there, you're going to be scrolling through a long list of sports, and then you're going to see this category called motorsports, and everything's going to be kind of jammed into there. And that's if you find anything at all, right? And so the reason that that's happening is because the way that those companies are approaching the market is they're targeting, it's a very new space, right? It's been only 3.5 years since the law was repealed that allows sports betting to operate in our country at a state-by-state level. And so the major focus of a lot of those big operators has been immediately to go after kind of the diehard sports bettors, the people that are already participating in it, either illegally or, through locally or in whatever way that wasn't through a regulated online gambling app. And so if you look at the amount of money that's being spent existing, motorsports is pretty low on the list. And so the investment hasn't been made into that audience. And our fundamental kind of thesis at GridRival is that we believe that it's low on the list because the motorsports audience has not had a compelling reason to act, or, an exciting enough product to get them engaged at an enthusiast level to make this more fun. And so that's kind of inherently the goal that we're going after and we're trying to solve over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think the sports betting market in the U.S. is $84 billion or something crazy like that. So there's definitely a lot of money legally or illegally spent in that world, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know you touched on it a little bit, but do you think you'll intend to compete with the likes of FanDuel or DraftKings, or more stay in your lane, pun intended, I know that, when DraftKings and FanDuel first burst onto the scenes, they were everywhere, right? And I know a lot of that from the business side of it, that new customer acquisition costs a lot of money, right? Hey, your first $10, spend $10, we'll give you 10, or we'll match your deposits up to 100, or whatever it is, right? So what are your thoughts on
and the reason they're having to do that is because there's very little product differentiation in that space right now. Like if you go onto FanDuel or DraftKings or BetMGM or Caesar Sportsbook, like the colors are different, the UI is different, but in a lot of ways the products are very similar, and so they're having to compete over price, which is never the best spot to be. I think you're going to see that change. It has a lot to do with how a sports book has been built previously, and I think that's going to change. And that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. Like, I think there's two buckets of sports bettors, and I think there's kind of two buckets of motorsports fans. And the two buckets of sports bettors are kind of diehards and enthusiasts, right? The diehard people use spreadsheets, they use algorithms, they actually don't care about the sport. They probably bet on ballet if the action was good, right? And they knew the lines. And then I think you have enthusiast players who they want to participate because it elevates the excitement of the game, right? They're the people that are going to put in $100 a month or $300 a month or $20 a month. And they're going to do it because it creates a deeper experience with some of the games that they love. And then if you overlap that with motorsports, I think goes back to what I said earlier, which is there's kind of two major categories, which is like this one bucket of like, I really kind of mostly love motorsports, or like I love everything in motorsports is one thing I like. This category is not really our target audience for the next 24 months. It's that intersection of enthusiast player mostly likes motorsports, which is a very large percentage of race fans that are never going to find themselves on FanDuel betting on Formula One, because number one, it's too confusing, and number two, it's too inauthentic. I think like the compelling thing that they need is something that's unique and authentic to only the sports they like. And then secondarily, it needs to be digestible and understandable. And if any of you have ever, bet on sports, like I think we all know that sports betting is a very esoteric thing to do. If you've never done it, it's very intimidating. If you put a sports betting app in front of somebody who's never bet on sports and you started a timer and you said, say stop when you understand how to do this comfortably, I think however long that would take, like if it took the same amount of time to onboard a user to TikTok would be out of business next week. So it's a very big learning curve, and I think that's one of the things we have to solve with the motorsports audience as well, is they have to be able to sign on and they have to be able to see a very easy, quick path to being able to understand how to do it and be successful at it.
So one other question around sort of the startup side of it. I would imagine that there were some bumps along the way. What's been your biggest challenge so far in the 3 or 3.5 years since you started GridRival?
Yeah, I mean, there's almost exclusively been bumps. It's a very typical startup story. If you guys have ever seen the show Silicon Valley, it's like, it's disturbing how accurate that show is. At some point, it's like they're on the fringe of going out of business on a daily basis. And it hasn't been that bad for us, but we had a rough first 2 years, primarily because we chose to launch this with a season-long game because we believed that foundationally that would be a tool that would help acquire customers and convert people from free players to depositing customers. It's also a very social game. And so as a result of that, half of our user base has come from referrals, people inviting other people. But the investment, that was very difficult because the one challenge with a season-long game is the seasonality itself, right? There's a, call it 6-week window every single year where 90% of players that year will sign up, which gives you a very small window every year to grow the product. And so when I had started, I had said that we had this kind of like, web only, really simple application. And when I went to go do this full time, the first goal was to build like a mobile native app, that was scalable to, 6-figure users. And that was for the most part kind of a disaster. We had hired an agency locally to help build that product. And I think it was just like, we didn't connect. And, I don't want to try and place blame, but I'll to say it didn't work, and we didn't have the product live in time. And so 2019 is like when you fail at attacking that window, it's like the next thing you do is like, well, we'll try again next year, which is a tough thing to do when you're burning money and there's not revenue yet. And so that was a plan. We kind of hunkered down, had to go raise some more money, really worked hard on the product, refined the product, had it all ready to go for 2020. I think we all remember what happened there. Friday at Australian Grand Prix, they're like, we're shutting down practice. This thing's not going to happen. And then they canceled the whole season. And so we're like, well, no one's going to want to play fantasy sports if there's no sports. And then when Formula One came back, they only announced 5 races. And so it was like, they didn't really have a full calendar. And so even then it was like, well, who wants to play fantasy sports when you don't even know if there's going to be a full season? So, I mean, it basically, that was a very difficult thing to have to go through. And so finally in 2021, we actually got it right. And, the launch was very successful. We passed, I think now we're over at 200,000 registered players. And everything worked out, but, it was tough, and that will test you mentally, emotional, in every possible way. Being on the fringe of kind of running out of money and just feeling like, when you put your heart and soul into something, especially when it's tied to a passion like this, it was a difficult time. But it was one of those things where I kind of just knew, like, you just got to keep at it. And, giving up on it wasn't an option. I think it was still a big enough opportunity to keep pushing through. And so I'm glad we got it to work. But that was definitely, for sure, probably the hardest thing I've ever been through in business, between this company and the last company.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit of the porpoising issues that Mercedes had with all the bumps in the road and handle it. Yeah, spinning that to the positive note, now that 2021, 22, what does success look like for you for the rest of this year and going into the 2023 season?
Yeah, I think success for us looks like getting our daily fantasy product out and like seeing really healthy early adoption. And I don't think like we need to blow it out of the water to where like our servers are shutting down and stuff like that. But I think like, if we'd see a healthy conversion rate of existing players in the states that we go live in convert to like depositing customers, even in small amounts, like that's going to be a really good indicator that, we're onto something, that the audience is ready. We've done a number of user polls previous to this to kind of test like how ready is the audience to bet. And the numbers are always very encouraging, but like we're coming down to rubber meets the road, no pun intended. And so I think for us, like that conversion rate of like free play season long players to customers who play daily fantasy games with real money on the line is going to be a really important metric. And then I think probably the other one for us is like cost to acquire a net new customer. You alluded earlier to the amount of money that some of these huge operators are spending to acquire customers, and it's obscene. I mean, it's there's been points where it's been in the low thousands to acquire a depositing customer. And so our average cost to acquire a user, I wouldn't call them a customer because they're not monetized yet, but to acquire a user, if you look at, the history that we've been around and how much we spent on marketing and advertising relative to how many users we have, we spent, under $2. And so I think to the degree that we can still maintain that performance, that will be a big win for us in the remainder of the year. So those are kind of like the two things I would say are our biggest goals in the next 3 to 4 months.
That's exciting. I know that I'll definitely be a user. I might be the most degenerate of anyone here in terms of the DFS type stuff. It just gives you something to watch, right? Not small money, don't get me wrong, but I do enjoy it. It gives you a little something to root for, right? I mean, for example, if you threw a couple bucks on Nick DeVries this past week and finished top 10, that just, amps you up, gives you something else to follow, maybe learn a little bit about a driver or an athlete that you didn't know about, right?
Yeah, and I think too, like existing players are going to have an edge for a little bit, because the game mechanics are almost identical. Like you understand how improvement points work, and a lot of these things that newcomers have to have a little bit of a learning curve on. But I hope that you do, and I hope that you enjoy it and win some money.
I'll never be a sharp, as they call it in the industry, but
and I won't either. And I think like there's a lot of us that never will be. And I think that the number of people that won't be is a pretty substantial market, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know, Cole, you might be in Austin.
Yeah,
this year, so
if we end up making it down to Austin, are you free for a beer if we come down there and find you at the RV at the back street? Because we'll come find you if we come down.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, shoot me an email. If there's any other GridRival users, find my email. We'll be on the back straight. We'll have a full bar and catered food and all sorts of good stuff. So happy to host you, as long as the fire department's not worried about capacity.
Just don't bring your smoke canisters or whatever and throw them on the track like they did.
The flares.
Yeah. In the Netherlands. But no, this is awesome. We really appreciate your time. We really appreciate you joining us. We've been and we'll continue to be GridRival fans and users and followers. So thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot for having me, and appreciate the support and the continued use of the product. Excited to get your feedback when the new